I think like it was really interesting as you see this crossover between like consumer and like enterprise use cases of AI, where like consumers will go out and they'll do the hard work to like figure out, oh, I can make a talking baby podcast.
Yes.
And then I'm on Forbes the other day and I see a Hedra generated like ad, and I text Justine. I'm like, what? How did this happen?
With the talking baby advertising some like enterprise software or something.
And it was,
Oh my God,
it was
really?
like, yeah, it was like, it was weird because it was like, I mean, first of all, the talking baby stuff, like that was so last month. Like, you know, people gotta, I was kidding. But I mean, it's just interesting that like, you know, now we're in the era where like, you know, companies are moving really fast now. Like they're really getting excited about adopting AI. And I think, you know, it's our job as startups to kind of take these like signals from the prosumer users and then productionize that and make that something that, you know, enterprise users can come and, you know, rely on to make the next generation of their content needs. You might have seen some of the viral content that was produced with us in the past couple months, ranging from everything from those like fun anime style characters a couple months ago to the baby podcast to, I actually don't know what's trending this week. I think memes are one of the best go-to-market strategies for a lot of companies. It's kind of crazy the way that you can gain mind share just by getting in front of so many people. I think this is becoming a really common strategy with a lot of startups. I mean, there's another A16Z startup, Cluely, that definitely has like leveraged a lot of the virality of Twitter to that recognition. I think though what memes really are is that this technology has allowed people to be very creative very quickly. And I think memes are like the manifestation of that creativity. Is this short form content has really come to dominate like the cultural consciousness. And one of the things that generative video does is it lets you take any idea and make it into that content in a matter of a couple seconds.
So explain a little bit why people use Hedra for memes and like how they do it and maybe how that connects to, you know, some of the markets that you're really going after.
Yeah, I mean, we were, I think, the first major audio video foundational model company that was able to deploy, you know, these full body expressive dialogue centric generative videos at scale. And people create millions upon millions of pieces of content with us now. And I think the reason that we really took off was because this was kind of a core missing element of the stack of how people were creating, you know, content. So things like creating generative podcasters, creating, you know, animated characters talking in scenes, creating singing, was stuff that was really challenging to do before us. It was either too expensive, it wasn't flexible enough, because we were the first to really bring this image to audio video model technology to market, or it was too time consuming. Like our model was very quick, it was very cheap. And I think as a consequence, we've seen the rise of these virtual influencers. I think CNBC had a really good article on virtual influencers powered by Hedra recently.
Can you give a couple of examples of how people, you know, of influencers people use Hedra for?
Yeah, I mean, like John Lavoie has created, who's like a very famous actor behind, you know, Taco from The League, created this whole series starting with this like, you know, Moses podcast to the baby podcast, which he actually started. And now those characters have specific identities. I think another like older example that was started at Hedra was NeuralViz, created this whole monoverse, really centered around these like identities of characters. So I think, you know, generative acting is really important because it's something that's quite distinct from just creating a media model. There's a lot that goes into imbuing, you know, personality and consistency and control into these models that's specific to performance in video. And so I think that's why you're starting to see these like distinct personalities take off that like aren't actually real people.
Yeah, totally.
I get a lot of Hedra videos on my Instagram Reels, and I'm starting to see a mix of totally new characters that like aliens, like in the NeuralViz series, that people never would have been able to create and like film before unless you're like a Hollywood studio with a big budget. I'm also seeing like real people using these sorts of tools to scale themselves. So like, especially a lot of influencers or content creators don't want to like always look super presentable and have the best lighting and have their like makeup and hair done.
Who look presentable all the time.
Because we have this array of lights and professional cameras. And I've seen like a lot of the like mom Instagrammers or people like that who do videos talking to the camera will be leveraging Hedra to generate content that gets the message across, but where they don't have to spend all of the time getting ready, getting in the right place and filming.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, this idea of like scaling your digital presence, because, you know, maintaining a personal brand is really important as a content creator. And it's hard to be like available 24/7. Like you see these trends where if people step away from their camera for a period of weeks, they lose followers. And I think that another really important point here is just how accessible a lot of this automation technology has become. Like we see a lot of use cases where people combine us with something like N8N, where they'll use like deep research to pull together scripts. They'll bring it into Hedra to generate the audio and video portion, and they'll automate the deployment to their channels. I think we're going to start seeing more workflows around the creation of like these autonomous digital personas, not just for like real people, but also for like total fabricated personas as well.
I don't know if you guys are getting these, but the history videos that are popping up on Reels a lot now, where, you know, we would all read history books, but it's sort of boring to read about like 500 or 1,000 or whatever years ago. But if you can like watch this character from the time talking through it and then showing you generated video of like what it would have looked like, it's just so much more of an engaging and cool experience.
For sure. I think, while we don't specifically target education, we do get a lot of education companies that build on top of our APIs. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is just looking at the engagement rate when you're interacting with a video. Like we just launched this real-time interactive video model, which is the first to bring this like low latency image, audio, video experience really to market. And something that, we've seen now is there are whole generations now of like language learning applications, of like, consumer education startups, of like consumer, like personal help and personal betterment. When you're able to bring the cost of this technology down low enough, I think it actually is fundamentally going to change how people interact with these LLMs that are driving a lot of these new experiences.
My pet Hedra project right now is chat with your favorite book or movie character.
Nice.
You can say, what were you thinking? Why did you go into the dark room when a killer was on the loose?
That's a really interesting project because a lot of people are very excited by audiobooks. But one challenge with an audiobook is like, you might get lost compared to like something visually where you can scan and go back. And if it's actually like an interactive persona that's reading you the book, you can ask clarifying questions. You can like, scroll back in time. I think it makes it like a much more rich experience than just listening to a static audio narration.
For any Neal Stephenson fans out there, the Diamond Age and the Primer for Young Ladies is sort of the canonical, book that like interactive book. I think we actually can do it now. Like I think we're actually quite close to having like a low latency, fully interactive book, and things like Hedra are kind of the key piece.
I agree. And I think it's going to go beyond just like avatars too. Like you can imagine soon, like we're going to have the technology to be able to, bring some of those visuals to life, allow users to shape the experience. And I think that this is valuable because it unlocks a new dimension of conveying information to people. Like historically, voice agents, very powerful, but you're missing out on all of the like visual comprehension that really benefits people while learning.
There are a lot of video models out there and video model AI companies. Video is a very big search space, I would argue. I mean, you have sort of two dimensions of pixels on each frame. Then you have another dimension, which is number of frames. And I don't think people often realize how big that search space really is, if you know what I mean. Like you can generate a single image that follows instructions pretty well, but generating a sequence of 120 frames that follows instructions is actually quite hard. So something that I think is really interesting about Hedra is you've sort of scoped down a very meaningful problem that's a little bit different from what the other video models are doing. Can you just describe that and like, how did you come to this idea and like, how do you define it now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. As you touched on, I think we do see specialization across like the foundation model layer. I think we see this with the large language models as well, where like Claude has become kind of the de facto coding model. OpenAI is that general assistant. Gemini is like powering a lot of enterprise use cases now, just due to its like cost effectiveness, speed, and general capabilities. I think with Hedra, we see something very similar in the video model space. Like the general capabilities of our base model is getting quite high, especially with our next generation model. And that opens up a lot of flexibility in the type of content you create. But where we spend a lot of time thinking about is like, how do you cross that like last mile of making something feel alive and that you care to listen to, that you want to engage with, that has like a consistent feel and personality. Like there's a fundamental notion of how do you like marry intelligence of the subjects within video with the core rendering experience that I think is at the heart of what we focus on at Hedra. So in my like, future state, like you should be able to have a subject in video that you can bidirectionally communicate with, that can follow cues, that has a distinct personality that you can program, and that creates like essentially the ultimate character for use in creating your media. And I think that necessitates vertical integration, not just in the core model layer, but also in like how you interact with the models. And I think that's another fundamental distinction with us is that we care a lot about thinking what the future UX looks like, about how do you actually like program a personality? How do you like bring this in with the other aspects you need to produce this type of content? And for me, like the fundamental root of this is like I grew up doing theater, not a professionally trained actor, as like one
You
article
could
said.
be though.
You know,
And anybody who finds a video of Michael online,
no,
Yes,
I
we should
will.
put a
I
bounty
will.
out for that.
I will beat any offer to destroy that video. I think I grew up like caring a lot about like character performance because I think if you just look at video, it's 99% of what we engage with, right? Everything from like your favorite ad to your favorite like learning like course online. To even these like faceless channels now driven by Hedra avatars. It's all about you connecting with someone. And I think historically that's been like a very hard problem to solve, right? And I think like one thing that we really did that kind of blew open the door is we just made it very accessible for people and we made it very fast and easy. And I think like when we're looking forward as to how the technology evolves, I think a lot of the lines between like what traditionally was like the intelligence portion of a model and what was traditionally the rendering portion of the model are going to go away. And we're going to have this like much more interesting way of interacting with these models where it's almost like talking to a system that understands your intentionality.
it sounds like you almost define your primitive as a character rather than a video.
Yeah, I would say that, in character is like the fundamental unit that we think about control, even though we do spend a lot of time thinking about how can we push forward these architectures of the core rendering model. We think it's really important to pick like an area that you can really focus on and excel in. And for me, it's like subject level control. It's making people feel very real. And I think there's so much rich data that's required that you have to collect about that, both from like users providing feedback on like how real these characters feel or how compelling their performance is, even down to like, how do we expose different control levers of the video model that are scoped specifically to multiple subjects within video that just kind of necessitate the focus of a team, as opposed to just like thinking about horizontally of how do we increase general model capabilities.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time making a bunch of different talking heads or characters for various sorts of videos. And I think one of the things that I've always loved about Hedra is like you are enabling people to do more things in one tool for this sort of character creation. Like you can create an image of a character there or upload it and save it to use it later, or you can transform it with something like a context, or the voices in particular are huge. Like you don't have to go to another application and generate a consistent voice over and over again for different clips. You can use a voice there, or you can even clone your voice within the platform, which I use like constantly. A bunch of intros to like my YouTube videos and tutorials now are actually my Hedra avatar using the voice that I've cloned on Hedra.
It's really hard because the generative media landscape has become very fragmented, and there are companies like Black Forest Labs who are really pushing forward the technology, but still rely on like partners like us to bring those experiences into something that can be directly shipped to prosumers and enterprise users. So I think something that we try really hard to do is that we try to curate the experience around what technology you use. So even though we may only for now control the core video model, we really try to think about like what is the current market leader. And it just so happens we end up working with a lot of A16Z companies like 11 Labs and
Not
like
a coincidence.
PFL. Good company to make that happen.
Explain how you made that decision as a founder, because I think a lot of founders address this type of issue where it's I control a certain portion of the stack. I know the best experience requires sort of a larger workflow. I think you've been pretty forward looking among AI companies to kind of bring it all into one platform and kind of create the experience, without being so opinionated about what tech you get from where. Like, can you just describe how you made that decision?
Yeah, I think it's partly about focus, right? It's about knowing what you can do better than anyone else and like where you should invest the resources to continue to excel. And it's partly about like, I think, a deep understanding of what the customer needs are and like what the pain points are in the market. So for me, I come from the standpoint where when I first started Hedra, it was just hard to put dialogue in media,
Yeah.
People would make like a 2 to 4 second, mostly static clip, and then they do lip sync on top of it. And it just felt like something that should be unified. Like it felt like, putting lips on top of something is not actually driving the animation. Like your breathing is correlated with how you talk, right? How you move your hands. I mean, I guess I do weird hand gestures. Now I'm getting self-conscious.
I would argue it's correlated.
But it's correlated most of the time. And so that was kind of like that core technical idea is like, how can we make a more holistic video model that's conditioned on different control signals that are required to, push the state of the art forward? And then it kind of came from like a market standpoint as well, because I think we're seeing right now this like experimentation of the market, figuring out what people are willing to pay for. And there are applications that are like wildly popular, but maybe have low willingness to pay. And then on the converse side, there are applications that maybe aren't wildly popular, but they're so popular amongst a passionate group of segments, these companies can scale to like hundreds of millions of revenue. And I think, as a founder navigating the AI space, I think it's really important. I think Anish actually had a really good article about this, about like building deep for people that really care. And I think like the people that are trying to create these like digital personas, like the marketers, the like, content creators, like there's like a very high quality bar. And there's also not only that, there's a need to create that like interface that's intuitive. Because this is a very hard problem. Describing someone's personality is something that's quite hard to do in a couple sentences to an LLM. I think like building these like programmable digital personas is going to require like a lot of research and a lot of dedication, and also like fundamentally new ways of interacting with the models.
And so what you're describing in a sense is kind of putting the user and the user experience above everything, like building sort of a user-centric company, and like say, hey, let's give them what they want, not fixate so much on the technology we can provide.
I think, I am a PhD student by trade.
Well, so this is why I was going to ask, right? This is rare for like a computer science PhD student to like do that.
Yeah.
Was this a hard thing for you to do?
No, I mean, like maybe I just wasn't a good enough PhD student. I don't know. But for me, I was always like, you could spend all of your effort just focused only on model, right? And then you can allow people to come and like discover use cases on top of you. But when I think about like the most iconic companies in the space, they did that last mile, right? Like ChatGPT has built out a really good user experience for interacting with LLMs, and they've built things into that core workflow that people aren't coming for they do come for the API, but like most of the like market recognition for ChatGPT is like ChatGPT.
Totally.
Yeah.
And not only for OpenAI, like the whole AI like industry is kind of driven by the ChatGPT, becoming a thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that for me, it was like you need to identify like that core pain point and core market segment that you need to serve, and you need to do whatever possible to deliver the best experience to them. And if that involves bringing in partner models and like building out workflows that aren't just Hedra technology, that's fine to me. What matters is like, can we holistically offer the best product for those people? And can we take the learnings from those users and use that to build better models, but also just like a better overall platform?
Do you think this will, AI characters will eventually be generated by a single model, meaning, text script, speech synthesis, visual generation? Like, do you think it's all going to be one model eventually?
I think that people go back and forth on this. What I would say is I think we are tending to move towards a more mixed modality paradigm. I think we've already done that in terms of inputs. I think we're doing that now in terms of outputs. I think for me that the challenge has historically been that people want a lot of control. And typically the way you get really good control currently is by having either extremely strong prompt adherence, like GPT-4o image gen. But even then there's like, challenges in getting the correct aesthetics. Like there's still a role for like Midjourney, for example, because it has that cinematic style that people really like, that GPT-4o doesn't quite get, even though it has amazing prompt adherence. And I think, with us, like, we can do audio code generation, but people really want to clone their voices, right? They want that like, pitch control. They want that speech control. They want that timing control. And so the more stuff that you bundle into a monolithic core model, the higher the bar becomes on like building that steerability into all of the modalities. And I think unbundling the inputs is a good way of still giving people that ability to go in and tweak specific things. But I do think that where I see the field going towards is monolithic omnimodal input, omnimodal output, where you can provide guidance signals to how closely the model adheres to each of the input modalities.
You make an interesting point that like a single prompt, no matter how complex, may not be good enough to create the exact video someone wants, which is different, right, from image, for instance, where like you could imagine sort of a perfectly adherent image model. Like you're almost saying in video that may not be desirable.
I think it's challenging, and like, people's brains are not wired to generate images from nothing, like I think like thinking back to like, when we were hunter-gatherers at some point, like the thought of like typing text into a computer and getting like a picture of what you see just generated for you is just like crazy. And, it becomes more complicated the more like dimensions you add. So it's like now you don't just have to think about like occupancy of like 2D space. You have to think about time. You have to think about what they're saying and when they're saying it. It's actually really tricky, if you've ever done this, to be able to get two people to talk to each other with two overlaid voice tracks and have it sound natural.
Yes.
And I think that that's one of the tensions with the technology, is the more control we surrender over to these very large data-driven models, the more priors we can bake in to make that easier to get to that natural distribution of content. But at the same time, the more control the user has to kind of surrender. And I think that there's a lot of hard UX work and obviously core model research in figuring out how to balance those two things into the next generation of creative tools.
It's just like a problem we learn again and again with every new tech cycle. Like 3 dimensions is way, way bigger than 2 dimensions, right?
Yeah.
And actually like a qualitative difference. Like the product you need is probably different for 3 dimensions than for 2.
And it's hard because, you know, even when you think about 3 dimensions, like tools like Blender are very complicated to use, right? Yeah. You know, I think there was a debate for a while about whether or not these like large end-to-end models versus these more like composite 3D generative systems would be more powerful, but both like are tricky because these 3D systems, it's hard to teach people how to use a 3D interface, probably even harder than teaching them how to prompt with references.
Yeah, totally.
I think one of the things like that is interesting when you think about control too is the longer form generations. Because one of the things I use the most in Hedra is like you can upload a minute or several minutes of audio and generate someone talking. And like if you put that into a model, if you say like I want a 2-minute video talking about this, into a model that does it all at once, like the script generation, the video, the audio, like that's like 2 whole minutes of points of tiny things you want to change. And then you've wasted like a ton of money, time, and compute on that 2-minute generation. Whereas like I love on Hedra that I can get the image perfect and generate the voice separately, get it exactly what I want, and then run the generation together and have that control.
I think that's why I'm really excited about the future of interactive video. I think like interactive video has been this kind of question mark of like what the products are going to look like on top of it. And, you know, we just launched this interactive avatar model. And one thing that I'm really excited about is like the future where you can like almost like a fluidic canvas be able to shape the elements of that 2-minute video. Yeah. Like you should be able to like stop a video and be like, hey, like you should look like more sad for this portion of the speech, right? And then just regenerate that portion. Yeah. And then I think having that like bidirectional communication between model and user is going to create like a very next generation experience. I think we're going to start seeing that relatively soon.
Do you think you'll ever have real AI actors, real in the sense that like instead of sort of prompting, like you could imagine like you're interacting real time with this sort of actor that you've created, and then you give them instructions and then they go off and sort of like act?
Oh, 100%. But I think the bigger limitation is not the video model right now. I think the bigger limitation is actually that I think large language models still have a lot of work in terms of making people feel very authentic. I think that partly because, you know, there's so much product market fit for large language models as assistants and as code generation. I don't think we see as much of an emphasis on like, you know, the personality being adaptable to like different personas. Like you do see the rise of all these like, you know, AI companion companies like Character AI being the most notable, but like Chai, Talkie, but still like when I talk to the characters, they all still feel like you can kind of feel the LLM underneath. And I think for us to get to that vision of like truly interactive digital personas in video, there still is a lot of work to be done on building like more configurable personalities within these generative like text models. Yeah.
It is funny when I saw Hedra outputs for the first time, like the video was amazing. And I was like, wait a minute, like the audio doesn't sound quite as good as I used to think AI generated audio sounds. And now like 11 Labs has released new audio models that are great. And now I'm thinking, oh, like the like content isn't as interesting as I thought it was before. There's this kind of race.
You know, it was funny because when we first launched, like people were always like, oh, you should use 11 Labs for audio. But we've always used 11 Labs for audio. And I think they've taken a huge step forward with V3. We're very excited for them to make it available via the API. I think, though, even audio is a really interesting space right now because I think this comes a little bit maybe back to what we were talking about earlier about how there being such a wide parameter space. Yeah. I actually think audio has a really wide parameter space that's still unexplored because so much of generative voice is used for like narration and voiceovers. Generating like audio in situ, like being able to have like a person talking in like a crowded cafe. We're starting to see that now in video models, but I actually think you want that ability to like do that ahead of time. And so I think having like audio models that you can probe more, that you can like prompt for ambient sound, they can do more mixing, having like multi-turn dialogue sound really natural is one thing that's required to get to this like next level of controllable video creation experience.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. And it really gives a sense for how hard this problem really is that you're tackling. Like even if you isolate only the audio component, the number of sounds that you could make over a 5-minute
Yeah.
video, right? Like is like and as humans, we experience like a very small slice of this. You think of like a waveform of a voice, but like there's a huge amount of unexplored search space.
There's always this joke where like, Twitter has this "it's so over" mind share, right? And like I've been hearing it's so over for like, image models and video models now for like 2 years. And people said when we came out too. I think LLMs are now kind of in this like scaling paradigm, right? Where like people are putting more compute in, they're doing more like RLHF, they're doing more reasoning. But like, video is actually still really early. I think getting to the point where we have like that super controllable steerability, that cost effectiveness, that real-time performance, that audio control, I think we still have more work to do.
It feels so similar to like early CGI special effects in movies where like the first time you saw a spaceship in like a late 90s movie, you're like, oh my God, it's so lifelike. And now you look back at it, it's like, this looks like a cartoon. Like, how did I?
It's really embarrassing because I was looking at our like first model generations, and I remember when I saw the very first model we did, I was like, oh my God, this looks 100% real. And then I was talking to a user who still loves our like first model, and I like pulled up the video and was like, oh my God, like I can't believe we launched this.
It speaks to how much improvement has been made and continues to be made, and stuff like the real time thing. I think a lot of people don't even know now that you could have a live real time conversation with an AI character. And there's different segments of the market. Like that user might like the early portions of the product, while other people are like, I want the like fastest, highest quality, like highest resolution model and product today.
I think that's like the interesting thing about adding video to these like experiences is that it creates like more of an engagement or emotional attachment in people often. Like there's just something different. And we see this now when we're talking to customer support companies. They're thinking about integrating real-time video. It's a lot harder to like yell at an assistant that has a face that's staring at you that can like wince. And, I think it's nice because it actually creates this like more empathetic environment for people. Daria, the CEO of Anthropic, talks a lot about how humans and AI are going to interact. But I think, creating like experiences where humans can feel an emotional attachment to AI that's like bidirectionally positive, I think is really important and one of the advantages of this real-time video technology.
I'm really curious to see too if most of the characters people are connecting with end up being other humans or like photorealistic humans or animated humans, or like you can imagine it's like a fluffy little ball that's like very cute and has like big eyes, like things that we also engage with, or maybe what the character is will be like different for each user.
Have you generated any fluffy balls?
So many, and cats. And Hedra actually does I've generated talking Waymos a ton with you guys. As you know, I'm constantly spamming you with them.
It's
and
pretty, I
I
think like the first thing I tested was like, what happens if I put a trash can in?
Yeah.
And I was surprised because like I thought it would like, invent like a mouth or something, but it flapped the like top of the trash can around. And I was like, oh, wow, this is trash.
Put this in the department of like humans aren't as smart as we think we are. It's like, oh, the model will never figure out that the lid should be the mouth, and it like does it first try.
I think one of the reasons like we really emphasized making a model that could kind of just do everything, and why we didn't do like, a traditional video model plus lip sync, but built a unified model, was because, when people come to a piece of software, there's nothing worse than like it not being able to do what you want it to do, or like having to like learn the ins and outs to know its limitations. And I think with our model, it was the first time someone could kind of go in and be like, oh, what happens if I put a rock? What does a talking rock look like? I want to make a podcast between like a robot and like a person. Yeah. And I think like having that model that can kind of just figure things out because it has that like intrinsic understanding of like dialogue and communication and personality is really important.
And I feel like, especially in consumer things, like that's where we see you get the really interesting and like revolutionary use cases of AI. Like I think there are a lot of use cases that are amazing that automate existing tasks or workflow or like ad generation or things like that, which are great and have a lot of economic value. But I think some of the like most life-changing stuff comes out of things that you could never do with the technology we have before, that people are just randomly like throwing stuff into a model and seeing what happens, which is very cool.
I think like it was really interesting as you see this crossover between like consumer and like enterprise use cases of AI where like consumers will go out and they'll do the hard work to like figure out, oh, I can make a talking baby podcast.
Yes.
And then I'm on Forbes the other day and I see a Hedra generated like ad and I text Justine. I'm like, what? How did this happen?
With the talking baby advertising some like enterprise software or something.
And it was,
Oh my God,
it was
really?
like, yeah, it was like, it was weird because it was like, I mean, first of all, the talking baby stuff, like that was so last month. Like, you know, people gotta, I was kidding. But I mean, it's just interesting that like, you know, now we're in the era where like, you know, companies are moving really fast now. Like they're really getting excited about adopting AI. And I think, you know, it's our job as startups to kind of take these like signals from the prosumer users and then productionize that and make that something that, you know, enterprise users can come and, you know, rely on to make the next generation of their content needs.
We talk about this a lot on our team, and what we call it is sort of AI native, you know, applications or use cases, right? Like it's relatively hard to get a big company to swap out their database for some AI powered database, you know, or like, you know, core workflows, billing workflows, whatever. But like these brand new experiences, that's kind of the exciting part of the market anyway. Like I think Hedra's like a great way for companies to start experimenting with these things.
Yeah, and like, you know, enterprise is one of our fastest growing segment, or it is our fastest growing segment now. And I think it is because people are realizing that it's kind of transformative when you don't have to spend weeks making content anymore. Like, you know, you could respond to things in real time. We have people that are making like automated newscasters, which I think is really exciting. I don't know about you, but like I think one of the great tragedies of our time is like the disappearance of local news, especially like, you know, if you live in like a big city like San Francisco or New York, it's fine, right? But, you know, there's so many areas of the country where people just don't have any visibility into what's happening, like in their government, local ordinance. And now we're starting to see people that are actually like bringing those experiences back because generative AI has made it like cheaper and faster. That one person can now basically run their own news channel, which is exciting.
And what's so cool about this is media consumption in the United States used to be quite homogenous. In retrospect, that was a local maximum, right? Like we get so much more information and so much more detail now that that's been kind of broken down. But like we definitely lost something too, right? There's this almost medium ground of personalization where it's like I want to know things that are happening in my town, but I don't actually necessarily want to like read 27 news stories that I've scoured the internet for about the, you know, right? Like this sort of like medium ground of personalization, I think is really, really cool.
I think what you mean is like personalization at scale. I might create like a piece of content that's maybe not for like one person, but for like a small group of targeted people. Like, you know, people who are really interested in like purchasing like a local food experience or like going to a local theme park. Like, can you make like targeted, like, you know, segmented personas and ads and interactive experiences for that group of people in a way that's like economical, but also way more effective than like not using interactive or like video media.
And it's like medium scale, or like Google is too much personalization scale, right? Like I really do think like it turns out an individual person is the wrong like primitive or the wrong like cohort size for personalization, right? It's just like, it's, you know, and you see this across all sorts of media consumption now.
I think a lot of times when people think about like the future of generative video, a lot of people go to this idea of like a personal Netflix, but I actually don't want a personal Netflix because I feel like there's something inherently social about a lot of consumption experiences. Like if you and I watch like the same movie, that we can like talk about it. We can talk about like the new Star Wars movie.
Yeah, totally.
But if like we saw like different endings, then it's gonna be kind of like, I mean, maybe it's interesting that.
But you're sort of you're right. It's like the shared human experience that you lose a little bit. And,
yeah.
But what's so cool about things like Hedra is like when you're giving people the ability to easily create these sort of experiences that like I think this is where this kind of personalization at scale that you're talking about kind of becomes possible.
Yeah.
I think interest-based stuff will be really interesting too, because if you think about, there's all these like, you know, small subreddits or groups where people all around the world have shared interests, like maybe this really specific brand of camera. And for most of those people, they would not have the time, money, or resources to buy all the cameras, professionally film themselves on camera, doing all of the reviews. Like they don't have a studio in their home, but they can now make like good professional looking content where they're essentially like the curator or the script writer, and they're directing like these Hedra characters talking about those things, and then publish them on video platforms and build that sort of community or social experience. Like I'm super excited to see more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think some people, I think, maybe it's kind of funny because we're on camera right now, right? But like, it's not for everyone. Like a lot of people don't like being on camera because it's hard. Like, I mean, when I first like did my first thing on camera, like I was like, oh my gosh, what if I say something wrong, right? Like, do I look okay? And
you look great. Don't worry.
I looked better, a year and a half, 2 years ago before a bunch of sleepless nights. I think like now, it's quite easy to like make a version of yourself, and it doesn't even be a realistic version, right? It can be like anime Michael. Everyone likes, we did our Series A announcement video and we made like a gold chain tech bro version of Michael.
Jersey Shore Michael.
Everyone wants that. Like people are like disappointed when they meet the real me. But I think like, being able to create these facsimiles of yourself and create like, content channels or like announcements is something that's becoming increasingly popular.
For sure. I have a friend who runs a penguin, like an animated penguin AI account of herself as like a fluffy penguin with like her personality. That it sounds crazy, but she has like millions of followers.
No, I believe it.
Yeah.
When you said run a penguin, I'm thinking, is this like a penguin business of some kind? Is this a giant mechanical penguin that she's physically running?
It's a fluffy penguin character.
Penguin.
Yeah. Since you mentioned sleepless nights, what do you want to tell people about being a founder? I mean, do you like being a founder? What's the hard part? What's the easy part? What have you learned?
I think a lot of people like glorify being a founder, especially in San Francisco. It just seems like this experience where you're like, building something that's generational. You get to build cool technology. You get to like go amazing places and meet amazing people. I grew up in a small town in Florida, so it was like never anything I really imagined for my own life. But what I'll say is it's like something that you really have to be called to do because it's hard like 99% of the time. Like 99% of the time, like, being able to like build something from nothing, it's always like you have to be the person that is always pushing and pulling things forward. And what you'll find is like, you'll bring people along the way, and people will get your vision and share your vision and push along with you. But that getting to that first point is actually really, really hard. And it doesn't get easier. The problems just change, right? Like you start, when you're building in stealth, right? You don't have customers, like you don't have to respond to support emails. Then you launch something, and then, for us, it was like, oh, great, like a couple support emails a day. And soon it was like thousands. And I'm like, oh my God, like, how am I going to answer all of these people, right? And it's just like, it's constantly problems like that where you just have to learn how to scale yourself. And it definitely is very physically draining. But it's just like one of those things where you have this like innate core of energy. It's so intrinsically fulfilling compared to anything else that I've done in my life. That I know I couldn't do anything else. And that's what keeps me going, is I just love what I do. I love our users. I love everyone I work with. I can't imagine doing anything else with my life. Like the thought of not being a founder is just like, I can't imagine it.
Getting a job.
But it's like, would I say it's like always fun? It's probably like in a lot of ways, like type 2 fun. If you don't know what that is, that's like when you're climbing a mountain and your like hands are bleeding and like, maybe you have some frostbite, and at the end, maybe you've permanently physically damaged yourself through the experience. But then you're like, wow, I would do that again, It's definitely one of those things where you have to give up the notion of having like work-life separation or like a personal life or anything. I'm in office usually like 7:30 a.m. every day, and I leave at like 10 p.m.
I mean, I've texted you at 2 a.m. about work, and then I see you like on Discord announcing a new feature at 5 a.m. I was like, what just happened?
Well, you give me an idea at 2 a.m. and it takes me a couple hours to implement it, right? Yeah, I mean, but it's like one of those things where it's like sometimes you'll just get into this flow state where you just have something that you just really want to bring out into the world, and you have to do everything in your power to make that happen. My background might be a PhD, but I love design. I love product. I vibe code a lot of prototype designs in my free time. I think like design is fundamentally changing thanks to AI.
Is this so you can flesh out the ideas for yourself, or is it a communication tool to your team, or some other reason that you do it?
I think it's a little bit of both. Like, I think it's hard to make click-through prototypes. I think oftentimes, like, I'll have something I want to convey to the team, but it's hard if I just say, go make this thing and make it feel good. That's not... I think one thing I've had to mature as a leader is you can't just expect people to like always know what good looks like. You have to like very clearly communicate your expectations. And there's nothing worse for a team than not clearly communicating your expectations and then post hoc being like, this doesn't meet them. So what I do now is I make like very rough code, and I try to get the flow state of new features that I want implemented correct. And I'll spend a lot of time with our designers, like talking through what are the corner cases, what are the things we didn't expect, how might this be like a scalable system for building like that next version of the product. I think being able to do that really rapidly with vibe coding, even though I'm a pretty good engineer, it just lets me like explore ideas really quickly and come to my own conviction, but also then communicate very clearly with something that actually works, where I think the next version of the product is going to be.
I'm really curious, when you do this, does your team react positively and say, oh, thank God, like Michael's like actually told us what he wants? Or are they like, uh-oh, like Michael's dumping like a prototype on us.
Michael
What
is
do we
the
do?
designer
Yeah.
now.
They'll have to be mutually exclusive. We have such an amazing group of people at Hedra. There have definitely been times where I have like been like, oh, let's just ship this prototype. And people have been like, this code is awful. We are not shipping this prototype. It's really hard to convince people to work like on the Silicon Valley, like, grind set way if you're not leading by example. Like, I think it's really hard to just be like, like it's 5 o'clock. I'm going to go check out. You guys, good luck. Yeah. Right. I don't expect anyone to work any more hours than me. I always try to set like the highest possible bar so that people feel like we're building together, and that I'm in there with everyone, because I am. Generally speaking, I think people respect that I put in the work and like I work the extra hours so I can still be hands-on, even though I do have to do recruiting and marketing and all the other random stuff you have to do as a Series A startup. So I think that matters. And I think it also keeps me really in touch with like what people are doing, because I know what people are doing, like where people are getting stuck. I know where we need to bring in like more people. And I'm still learning to scale my time. Like, I'm not perfect at it yet, but I think I always really want to be a hands-on leader.
So you're almost saying if you're going to do the vibe code prototype thing, you need to earn the right, like you need to earn your team's respect that you're like doing this with them, not just dumping stuff on them. And you need to be plugged in enough to your team to know like where and when it's useful, not like a blunt instrument.
That's exactly right. And I think that oftentimes it just, as we were talking about earlier, it helps you short circuit a lot of these like decision-making flashpoints on like what you're building, to be able to see something and like use it and touch it. Because I just think it's so hard to conceptualize these like interfaces, like just talking about them. I think you really do have to like feel them. There's something kind of transcendental about being able to create a UI and use it and like just kind of iterate on it in the moment. And I think this is like changing how we build software. Especially, I think creative tools are really exciting because there's just, as you're talking about, so much dimensionality and so many opportunities to rethink how we interact with media. And being able to just like change that interface in real time is really valuable for like gradient descending to whatever the right solution is.
I have to say, I've just been ridiculously impressed with the Hedra team, right? I think there's a relatively small set of companies in Silicon Valley right now that get AI, building AI native products, and just like work their butts off and ship product at high velocity. That's kind of the magic recipe right now, I think. And there's, maybe a dozen teams, in Silicon Valley, or 24 teams that are actually doing that right now. And like Hedra is definitely one of them. So we've just been so blown away.
And we're hiring. Hedra was not like that from the very beginning. I just want to be really clear. Like, when I first started the company, I was a fresh PhD student from Stanford. I like had no idea. Like, I was like, what's an engineering sprint? Like, is that like a paper deadline? And I think it's like just because I got so lucky having like really great mentors and like being able to like, especially A16Z was able to introduce me to so many like seminal engineering leaders and CEOs that I was able to like learn from. And I'm still learning like every day. But I think like, we've been really, especially in the last few months since our Series A, really cooking on like what the next version of the product looks like. And I'm really excited for people to get to try it. I think we've been incrementally improving a lot of things under the hood, but I think now is like the opportunity that we can really build next generation product.
Do you want to give a preview, or is this just a teaser for now?
I think that traditional prompt text to video is like very much not what the paradigm will look like. And I think a lot of what we're thinking about is how can you like co-create with AI that can understand your preferences, like in a similar way that like, Midjourney has become very aligned with like user aesthetic preferences. How can we make systems that are aligned with user narrative preferences? And how can we empower people that like maybe traditionally aren't creators, like product marketers, content creators, that have not used this technology to be able to create like longer form content that requires bringing together more of these pieces together into one workflow. And I think in the same way, like we've seen this transition from like, auto completion and code generation to now coding agents. I think we're going to see something very similar with content engines. And that's a lot of what we've been working on.
I totally agree with Matt that it's so impressive how quickly you and the company and the product have matured. And I think a lot of it also comes from how close you've been to users. Like there was a period of time where you were answering like every customer support email, and people on your like the team will reach out to me to be like, hey, as a creator, will you do a walkthrough of your workflow for it? Like, you truly really care, not just about training the best model for this use case, but also what your users actually want and what they're doing in a way that I think very few AI companies today do.
Some people appreciate the hands-on service. I will say some people ask to speak to my manager,
Right.
and I'm like, I have some sad news for you.
It may be correlated to how many emails you've answered so far that day.
Yeah, I mean, like the people.
He's very good in his
I
support email
know.
responses. I've
Well,
seen
I'm like customer
They're-
service inquiry number 5,001 of the day.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I think like sometimes people email me at like 6 a.m. or something. I usually wake up at like 5:30. But one day I woke up at like 6 and I rolled out of bed and I responded to someone in like 30 seconds. And then I got like a message being like, "Oh, but you didn't thank me for like emailing you." And I'm like, So I'm sorry about that. Now, this is my like secret pro tip. I probably should not admit this on recording, but I have a snippet in Superhuman that says, "Hi there, thank you so much for reaching out." Just automatically
It makes
gets
sure you
appended.
get the thank you in. It's
And
perfect.
always get the thank you in. One of these really exciting use cases of AI is like automating a lot of, these processes that you have to go through as a founder. Like I recently started using like Claude with like Linear and Notion and GitHub integration as like a micro PM working with me, checking in like YTBs. Yeah, I showed you this.
Yeah. This is
So
super
good.
cool.
It's
super cool.
so
Amazing.
useful because I'm just like, okay, check in with everyone, and boom, I get a status update. I get linear tickets updated. I get a bird's eye view of everything that's happening, and even like thanks people for like doing a good job of keeping everything up to date and moving. Sorry, everyone, that you found out this way. It's not me.
I can't let you go without asking for the Michael list of sci-fi shows and books that people should be watching and reading.
Oh man. Well, I'm like,
Or tell us two that you think people
I'm very like
must watch.
old school in terms of like my sci-fi taste. Like I liked Dune back when it was not cool to like Dune. I also liked Denis Villeneuve before he became like super popular. I really, really like Hyperion. I'm not sure if you read
Dan
that book.
Simmons.
Yeah. It's it's like a very poetic book. I think people think about sci-fi as being like explosions and like AI dystopia. But I really like, when people use just sci-fi as like another setting to tell really interesting character-driven stories. I also really like, for that reason, like Star Trek Deep Space Nine a lot. I think it's one of like the deepest like political and character-centric stories in like the Star Trek universe. So that's like, and Avery Brooks as Cisco is just like so good. So yeah, I would say like people should check out Star Trek. I think it's more pertinent than ever.